I want you to think about someone right now, someone who hurt you. Maybe it was your partner who broke your trust. Maybe it was a parent who never gave you the love you needed. Maybe it was a friend who betrayed you when you needed them most. You can feel that familiar tightness in your chest, can't you? That weight you've been carrying for months, maybe even years. Here's what most people don't realize about forgiveness. Everything you've been taught about it is incomplete. And that incomplete understanding is why you're still stuck, still angry, still replaying those painful moments over and over in your mind. Still letting that person control your happiness, even though they might not even be in your life anymore. What if I told you there's a completely different way to approach forgiveness? A way that doesn't require you to pretend everything is okay, or to become best friends with the person who hurt you. A way that actually transforms the pain into something powerful, something that makes your relationships stronger than they've ever been. This is called radical forgiveness, and it's not what you think it is. It's not about being weak or letting people walk all over you. It's actually the most powerful thing you can do for your relationships and your mental wellness. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how to use it to heal your deepest wounds and create the connections you've always wanted. But first, let me share something with you. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you might be right now. I was angry at my ex-partner for how our relationship ended. I was furious with my father for years of emotional neglect. I was bitter toward friends who had disappointed me. And all of that anger was eating me alive from the inside. It was poisoning every new relationship I tried to build. I tried traditional forgiveness. You know, that whole forgive and forget thing. It didn't work, because forgetting isn't possible when the pain runs deep. And pretending to forgive while still feeling angry inside just made me feel like a fraud. That's when I discovered something that changed everything. The problem with traditional forgiveness is that it puts all the focus on the other person. It makes forgiveness about them deserving it or earning it somehow. But radical forgiveness, that's completely different. Radical forgiveness is about you. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about healing yourself so thoroughly that the other person's actions can no longer control your happiness or your ability to love. Think about it this way. When someone hurts you, they essentially give you a gift. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but stay with me here. They show you exactly where you need to heal. They point directly to the wounds that were already there, waiting to be addressed. The person who triggers your abandonment fears, they're showing you where you need to learn to love yourself unconditionally. The person who betrays your trust, they're revealing where you need to strengthen your boundaries and your self-worth. This is what Colin Tipping, who basically created the whole concept of radical forgiveness, understood. He realized that every person who hurts us is actually serving our highest good by showing us what needs healing within ourselves. It doesn't mean their behavior was okay. It doesn't mean we excuse what they did. It means we stop giving them the power to define our worth and our capacity for happiness. Let me tell you about Sarah. She came to me completely broken after discovering her husband's affair. She'd spent 2 years trying to forgive him the traditional way. She'd go to therapy, she'd pray about it, she'd try to understand his perspective. But every time she looked at him, all she could feel was rage and betrayal. Their marriage was hanging by a thread. Then we started working with radical forgiveness. Instead of focusing on what her husband had done wrong, we looked at what this experience was teaching her about herself. She realized that she'd been giving away her power in the relationship for years. She'd been so afraid of being alone that she'd accepted being treated as less than she deserved. The affair wasn't the problem. It was the symptom of a much deeper issue. Through radical forgiveness, Sarah learned to see her husband's betrayal as the wake-up call she needed to reclaim her self-worth. She stopped trying to control his behavior and started focusing on healing the parts of herself that had allowed the relationship to become so unbalanced. And something amazing happened. As she healed, their entire dynamic shifted. He started showing up differently too. Not because she demanded it, but because she was no longer willing to accept anything less than genuine love and respect. If you're finding this perspective shift helpful, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of our content on building stronger, healthier relationships through inner work and radical healing. Now, let's talk about the science behind why radical forgiveness works so much better than traditional approaches. When we hold on to anger and resentment, our nervous system stays in a constant state of fight or flight. This floods our body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, this doesn't just affect our mental wellness. It literally changes our brain chemistry and our ability to form healthy attachments. Research from Stanford University shows that people who practice genuine forgiveness have lower blood pressure, better immune function, and significantly less anxiety and depression. But here's the key. The forgiveness that creates these benefits isn't about the other person at all. It's about releasing the emotional charge that keeps us trapped in the past. Traditional forgiveness often fails because it asks us to do something that goes against our natural protective instincts. It asks us to somehow make what happened okay when it wasn't okay. Radical forgiveness never asks you to do that. Instead, it asks you to find the gift in the experience, to discover how this painful situation is actually serving your growth and evolution as a human being. Let me give you a practical example. Let's say your partner consistently criticizes you. Traditional forgiveness would have you trying to understand why they do this, maybe making excuses for their behavior, and then somehow finding a way to let it go. But radical forgiveness takes a completely different approach. With radical forgiveness, you'd ask yourself different questions. What is this experience teaching me about my relationship with criticism? Where did I learn that my worth was dependent on someone else's approval? How is this person's behavior showing me exactly where I need to develop stronger self-love and boundaries? See the difference? Instead of making the forgiveness about changing how you feel about their behavior, you're using their behavior as a mirror to understand yourself more deeply. And here's what's incredible about this approach. When you heal the underlying wound that made their criticism so painful in the first place, their criticism loses its power over you entirely. This is where radical forgiveness becomes truly transformative for relationships. When you're no longer wounded by criticism, you can respond to it from a place of strength and clarity instead of reactivity and defensiveness. You might choose to have a conversation about it. You might decide the relationship isn't healthy for you. Or you might simply let their criticism roll off you completely. But whatever you choose, you're choosing from a place of empowerment, not from a place of pain. I want to share another story with you about a client named Marcus. He'd been carrying anger toward his mother for 25 years. She'd been emotionally unavailable throughout his childhood, always too busy with work or her own problems to really see him or connect with him. This pattern had followed him into every romantic relationship he'd ever had. He'd always choose partners who were emotionally distant, and then he'd exhaust himself trying to earn their love and attention. Marcus tried traditional forgiveness with his mother many times. He'd remind himself that she'd done the best she could with what she had. He'd focus on the good times they'd shared, but the anger and hurt always came back because the real wound had never been addressed. When we started working with radical forgiveness, everything changed. Marcus began to see that his mother's emotional unavailability had actually been preparing him for something important. It had made him incredibly skilled at reading people's emotional states. It had developed his empathy and his desire to help others feel seen and understood. These qualities had led him to a career in counseling, where he was helping hundreds of people heal from similar wounds. More importantly, his mother's emotional distance had shown him exactly what he needed to learn about love. He needed to learn that his worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's ability to see and appreciate him. He needed to develop the capacity to give himself the love and attention he'd always been seeking from others. This is the radical part of radical forgiveness. It's not just about letting go of anger. It's about recognizing that everything that happens to us, even the most painful experiences, is somehow serving our highest good and our deepest growth. It's about trusting that life is always conspiring in our favor, even when it doesn't feel that way. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true, or maybe even a little spiritual for your taste. That's okay. You don't have to believe in any particular spiritual framework for radical forgiveness to work. You just have to be willing to consider that pain always points toward what needs healing, and that feeling always leads to greater freedom and happiness. Let me walk you through the practical steps of radical forgiveness, so you can start applying this in your own relationships today. The first step is to identify the charge. When you think about the person who hurt you, what emotions come up? Anger, sadness, betrayal, disappointment. Don't try to change these feelings or make them go away. Just notice them and allow them to be there. The second step is to look for the pattern. Is this the first time someone has hurt you in this particular way? Or have you experienced this type of pain before? If it's a pattern, that's actually good news, because it means you're getting multiple opportunities to heal the same wound. Life is persistent in its desire to help us grow. A third step is to find the gift. This is where radical forgiveness gets really powerful. Ask yourself what this experience is teaching you about yourself. What qualities is it helping you develop? What boundaries is it showing you that you need? What old beliefs about yourself or love is it asking you to release? The fourth step is to reclaim your tower. Instead of focusing on what the other person should do differently, focus on what you can do differently. How can you show up more authentically in your relationships? How can you communicate your needs more clearly? How can you love yourself more fully? The fifth and final step is integration. This isn't a one-time process. Radical forgiveness is a practice. Every time the old anger or hurt comes up, you gently redirect your attention back to the gift and the growth. You remind yourself that this experience has served your highest good, even if you can't see exactly how yet. Let me tell you what happened with Marcus after he worked through these steps with his mother. He realized that his pattern of choosing emotionally unavailable partners was his unconscious way of trying to heal his relationship with his mother through other people. Once he understood this, he could make different choices. He started dating differently. Instead of being attracted to distant, hard-to-reach people, he found himself drawn to someone who was emotionally available and genuinely interested in creating a deep connection with him. For the first time in his life, he was in a relationship where he didn't have to earn love. He could simply receive it and give it freely. Even more beautiful, his relationship with his mother started to heal too. Not because she changed, but because he was no longer needing her to be different than she was. He could appreciate the love she was capable of giving without resenting her for what she couldn't give. This took so much pressure off their relationship that she actually started opening up more naturally. If you're someone who's been struggling to move on from past hurts, I want you to know that sharing this content with a friend who might need to hear this message could be the exact gift they need today. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who are most stuck in old patterns of anger and resentment. Now let's talk about how radical forgiveness specifically transforms romantic relationships. One of the biggest challenges in dating and long-term partnerships is that we often project our unhealed wounds onto our partners. We make them responsible for healing hurts that they didn't create. This is where so many relationships get stuck or fall apart entirely. Traditional relationship advice often focuses on communication techniques or compromise strategies. And while these things can be helpful, they're really just surface-level solutions. If the underlying wounds aren't healed, the same conflicts will keep showing up in different forms. Radical forgiveness changes this completely because it makes healing a personal responsibility instead of a joint project. When you've done the work to heal your own wounds, you show up in relationships from a place of wholeness instead of need. You're able to love your partner without needing them to fill the empty spaces inside you. This doesn't mean you become completely independent and don't need anyone. Healthy relationships always involve interdependence, but there's a huge difference between choosing to share your life with someone because you enjoy their company and clinging to someone because you're afraid of being alone. I want to share a story about Elena, who'd been through 3 serious relationships that all ended the same way. She'd start out feeling happy and confident, but gradually she'd become more and more anxious about whether her partner really loved her. She'd start monitoring their behavior obsessively, looking for signs that they were losing interest or planning to leave. Eventually, her anxiety would become so overwhelming that it would push the relationship to its breaking point. Elena knew the pattern, but she couldn't seem to break it. She'd tried therapy, she'd read self-help books, she'd practiced meditation and affirmations. Nothing seemed to work. The anxiety would always come back as soon as she started feeling close to someone. When we began exploring her history through the lens of radical forgiveness, we discovered that Elena's father had left when she was 7 years old with very little explanation. One day he was there, and the next day he was gone. She'd spent years trying to understand what she'd done wrong to make him leave. Elena had already done traditional forgiveness work around her father. She understood that his leaving wasn't really about her. She knew he'd been struggling with his own issues. But the underlying wound hadn't healed because she'd never found the gift in that experience. Through radical forgiveness, Elena began to see that her father's leaving had actually given her an incredible gift. It had made her fiercely independent and self-sufficient. It had developed her empathy for other people who felt abandoned or rejected. And most importantly, it had created a deep longing for authentic, committed love that would never settle for anything superficial or conditional. But the shadow side of that gift was that she'd learned to scan for signs of abandonment so vigilantly that she often created the very thing she was trying to prevent. Her anxiety about being left was actually pushing people away. Once Elena could see the gift clearly, she could also see what needed healing. She needed to learn that her worth wasn't determined by someone else's choice to stay or go. She needed to develop such a strong relationship with herself that even if someone did leave, she'd know she'd be okay. This is where radical self-forgiveness becomes essential. Elena had to forgive herself for all the ways she'd sabotaged relationships out of fear. She had to forgive herself for not knowing how to love herself well enough to trust that she was worthy of staying for. And she had to forgive herself for making her partners responsible for healing a wound they hadn't created. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months of doing this deep forgiveness work, Elena met someone who was emotionally available and genuinely interested in building something real with her. But more importantly, she was able to receive his love without constantly questioning it or testing it. She could trust that if he was choosing to be with her, it was because he genuinely wanted to be. This brings me to something really important about radical forgiveness in relationships. It's not just about forgiving other people. Often, the person we most need to forgive is ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves for not knowing better when we were younger. We need to forgive ourselves for making choices from a place of woundedness instead of wisdom. We need to forgive ourselves for all the times we've hurt others because we were hurting ourselves. Self-forgiveness is actually the foundation that makes forgiving others possible. When you've truly forgiven yourself, you understand that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness and healing they have access to in any given moment. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does free you from the need to punish people for being human. If this resonates with you and you want to see more content about creating authentic, healthy relationships through inner work, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Let me give you some practical tools for implementing radical self-forgiveness starting today. The first tool is the mirror exercise. Every morning, look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and say, "I forgive you for not knowing better. I forgive you for making choices from fear instead of love. I forgive you for being human and imperfect. You are worthy of love exactly as you are." This might feel awkward or even emotional at first. That's completely normal. You're rewiring neural pathways that have been reinforced for years or even decades. Be patient with yourself and keep practicing. The second tool is the gratitude reframe. Every time you catch yourself in self-criticism or regret, pause and ask yourself, what did this experience teach me? How did this mistake help me grow? What gift did I receive from this challenge? This trains your brain to look for the learning and growth in every experience instead of just the pain. The third tool is the compassion practice. When you're struggling with forgiving yourself or someone else, imagine how you would treat a small child who was hurt and confused. You wouldn't yell at them or punish them for not understanding something complex. You'd be gentle and patient and loving. Treat yourself with that same compassion. Now let's talk about what radical forgiveness looks like in action within your current relationships. Maybe you're in a relationship right now where old hurts are creating ongoing tension. Maybe your partner did something months or even years ago that you still can't quite let go of. Maybe you keep bringing it up in arguments, or you can feel it creating distance between you. Traditional advice would probably tell you to have another conversation about it, or to try to understand their perspective better, or to just decide to move on. But radical forgiveness offers a different path. Start by getting really honest about what this hurt is showing you about yourself. What old wound is it triggering? What fear is it activating? What belief about love or relationships is it challenging? Often, the things that hurt us most in relationships are the things that connect to our deepest insecurities or unhealed childhood wounds. Once you can see the connection clearly, you can start to address the real issue, which isn't your partner's behavior. It's the wound within you that made their behavior so devastating. This is incredibly empowering because it means your healing doesn't depend on them changing or apologizing or making it up to you somehow. Your healing is entirely within your own control. Let me share one more story about a couple named David and Rachel. They'd been married for 12 years when David had an emotional affair with a coworker. It didn't become physical, but there were months of secretive texting and emotional intimacy that should have been reserved for their marriage. When Rachel discovered what was happening, she was devastated. They tried traditional couples therapy. They worked on communication skills and rebuilding trust. David was genuinely remorseful and committed to changing his behavior, but Rachel couldn't get past it. Every time David was on his phone or came home late from work, all the fear and anger would come rushing back. Rachel was stuck because she was trying to use traditional forgiveness for something that required radical forgiveness. She was focusing on David's behavior instead of what his behavior was revealing about unhealed aspects of herself. When Rachel started exploring this betrayal through the lens of radical forgiveness, she discovered something powerful. David's emotional affair had triggered a deep wound from her childhood around not being chosen or prioritized. Her parents had always been more focused on her older brother's achievements, and she'd grown up feeling like she had to compete for love and attention. David's emotional affair had activated that same wound. It made her feel like she was once again not enough to hold someone's full attention and commitment. But instead of seeing this as a problem, radical forgiveness helped her see it as an opportunity to finally heal that old wound completely. Rachel began doing deep work around learning to choose and prioritize herself. She started saying no to commitments that drained her energy. She began pursuing hobbies and interests that brought her joy. She developed friendships that were nourishing and supportive. Most importantly, she learned to give herself the attention and priority she'd always been seeking from others. As Rachel healed, something beautiful happened in her marriage. She stopped monitoring David's behavior so closely because she was no longer looking to him to prove her worth. She could trust him without needing to control him because her sense of security was no longer dependent on his actions. David noticed the shift immediately. Rachel became more attractive to him, not physically, but energetically. She was more confident, more joyful, more at peace with herself. The emotional affair had actually led to the strongest, most authentic period of their marriage because it had forced them both to grow in ways they might never have grown otherwise. This is the ultimate goal of radical forgiveness in relationships. It's not about forgetting what happened or pretending it was okay. It's about using what happened as a catalyst for becoming the most healed, whole, and authentic version of yourself. When both people in a relationship are committed to this kind of growth, conflicts become opportunities for deeper intimacy instead of threats to the relationship's survival. Before we wrap up, I want to address something that might be coming up for some of you. Maybe you're thinking that this approach sounds like you're letting people off the hook for bad behavior, or that you're somehow enabling harmful patterns by not holding people accountable. Radical forgiveness isn't about accepting unacceptable behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the emotional charge around that behavior so you can respond to it clearly and effectively. When you're not reactive, you can set boundaries that actually work. When you're not trying to punish someone, you can focus on protecting yourself and creating the relationships you actually want. Sometimes radical forgiveness leads to deeper intimacy and healing within a relationship. Sometimes it leads to the clarity that a relationship isn't healthy and needs to end. But either way, you're making choices from a place of empowerment rather than woundedness. I also want to acknowledge that this work isn't always easy. Some wounds run very deep, and healing them can take time and patience and sometimes professional support. Don't pressure yourself to forgive quickly or to feel different than you feel. Radical forgiveness is a practice, not a one-time achievement. Be gentle with yourself as you explore these concepts. Notice what resonates and what feels challenging. Start with smaller hurts before you tackle the biggest ones. And remember that every step toward healing is a step toward greater freedom and happiness. If you found value in this exploration of radical forgiveness, I'd love for you to share this video with someone who might benefit from this perspective. Sometimes, the people we care about most are the ones who are most stuck in old patterns of anger and resentment. And sharing this could be exactly what they need to begin their own healing journey. As we close, I want to leave you with this thought. Every person who has ever hurt you has also been your teacher. They've shown you exactly where you needed to grow, exactly what you needed to heal, exactly what you needed to learn about love and boundaries and self-worth. This doesn't make their actions okay, but it does make them meaningful. Your pain has never been pointless. Your struggles have never been wasted. Everything you've been through has been preparing you to love more deeply, to connect more authentically, and to show up more fully in all your relationships. The journey of radical forgiveness isn't just about healing the past. It's about creating a future where you're no longer controlled by old wounds, where you can love without fear, and where you can trust your own resilience no matter what challenges come your way. That's the true gift of radical forgiveness. It doesn't just heal your relationships, it transforms your entire experience of being human. And that transformation is always, always worth the journey. Thank you for taking this journey with me today. If you're ready to continue this work, make sure you're subscribed for more content on creating authentic, healing relationships through radical self-love and forgiveness. Until next time, remember that you are worthy of love. You are capable of healing, and your greatest growth often comes through your greatest challenges.